Hello, today I will introduce to everyone the development process of the piano. The piano first appeared in Italy around the year 1700. A person named Bartolomeo Cristofori invented the first piano. Specifically, in 1709, he made 3 pianos, and the shape of those pianos was very similar to the harpsichord, both having that triangular shape. At that time, Cristofori was serving in the public office of Florence under the Medici family. He was responsible for tuning their harpsichords and also spent time researching the making of musical instruments. Actually, before the appearance of the piano, keyboard instruments had existed for a long time, starting from the 11th century with the pipe organ, and then later on. And then to the clavichord. These instruments each had their own unique features and limitations, and there was a continuous effort to improve the musical expressiveness of keyboard instruments, including some mechanical modifications. Of course, besides Cristofori, there were many others during his time, or even before him, who were attempting to create the piano. But many attempts failed because the construction of the piano is quite complex. There were some technical mechanical issues, such as the entry hammer, which often, after striking a string, would fall and easily bounce back up. This was a very common problem at the time. Its response speed was not fast enough, so when you repeatedly played a note, it couldn't quickly strike the string, because the distance between the hammer entry and the string was too large. These issues were recognized at the time, and corresponding improvements were made. The first was the invention of the damper, which is almost the same as the damper we use today. This device allows us, when playing a note, to have the damper on the string lift, allowing the string to vibrate and produce sound. Then, when we release the key, the damper falls back down, pressing against it, and thus stops the sound. The second invention is that Christopher used something called a backcheck, which is a small wooden block. This device is used to catch the hammer after it strikes the string and falls back, preventing it from bouncing back again. This device has another advantage, which is that it raises the hammer to a height that shortens the distance to the string. So, when repeating the same note, the speed will be a bit faster. The third invention is a soft pedal device, which is what we now use as the soft pedal. But at that time, there were no pedals. Cristofori made it so that this device allows us to strike a note where the hammer hits one string instead of 2 or 3, making it easy to produce a very soft volume. Regarding the range, his own pianos generally had 4 octaves, at most up to 4.5 octaves, which is not a very large range. The next person to be discussed is the second individual after Cristofori, who made a significant contribution to the development of the piano, and his name is... At that time in Germany, he was already a very well-known piano maker, including J.S. Bach and Frederick II, who had both heard his pianos. There is a record that mentions Bach saying, "I really like the tone of this piano." But there were also some shortcomings. He felt that the notes in the high register were relatively weak, and at the same time the initial touch of the piano felt quite heavy. The reason for its heaviness is what I'm about to explain. The Cyberman, his piano is known as the English-style 7-string mechanism, meaning that behind the keys there are 2 levers connecting to the hammer. Therefore, when you strike it, the force will definitely feel heavier, but its advantage is it strikes the strings with greater force. This results in a fuller tone, and that's the first invention of Superman. The second contribution is a device for a specific purpose, but it was also a precursor to the sustain pedal we use today. At that time, this device was controlled by a lever, meaning when we press down a key, it prevents the damper from coming down, allowing the string to vibrate freely. This way, the sound continues to resonate. These are the 2 contributions made. Next, this person. Previously, he worked with Superman, and after that, he became independent. He mainly manufactured pipe organs and pianos, particularly Stanz pianos, which were especially favored by Mozart. In the letter, Mozart mentioned that he originally had a favorite piano until he heard this particular piano. Specifically, Mozart said that its touch was very light, the response speed was very fast, and its damper was excellent, meaning the sound could disappear quickly. Additionally, the sound of each key was very even, with a very uniform tone. Aside from being a bit expensive, Mozart really liked this piano. Speaking of the light touch, it's also because of the style of the action, known as the Viennese action, which is a single lever mechanism. It differs from Silbermann's double lever or English action, where the hammer is directly connected to the back end of the key. So when you play it, but the speed is fast. Secondly, the touch is very light, which was also very popular at the time. This lightness is why you see Mozart's works, such as piano sonatas, are very suitable to be played on this piano. Additionally, Stein reduced the weight of the hammers. Secondly, it also it provided 2 sets of strings for each note, except for the high register, and then there was a knee lever pedal, which are its main contributions. Next, I will talk about the piano from Scotland. I previously had the opportunity to see an existing piano. If everyone is interested, you can find that piano in one of my earlier videos. It continued the English action mechanism and made further improvements on that basis. First, it made the piano much larger, expanding from the original 4 or 5 octaves to now having 6 octaves. An important invention was the development of 2 types of pedals. One is the sustain pedal, and the other is the soft pedal. Previously, pedals were either controlled by a lever or by the knee, so here the pedals became very convenient, just like the ones we use today. The biggest feature of the Berger piano is its very powerful sound. This is also thanks to the English action mechanism. As mentioned before, because this mechanism has the same lever system, the touch is definitely heavier, but at the same time the sound produced is very powerful. The last person to mention is the renowned Sebastian Era, who was the most famous piano maker in the 19th century. The pianos we use today are very similar to his. Well, otherwise, it was originally made before the development of the milk pipeline. And even though we talked about so many piano makers before, the pianos gradually improved step by step. However, until the era of Erard, there was still a major issue with pianos, which was the insufficient response speed of the keys, especially noticeable when playing repeated notes. It couldn't quickly respond, and the reason was that every time it struck the strings, the hammer would fall back to its original position. The original position was quite far from the strings, so it required a long distance to strike the strings again, which took a relatively long time. All the mechanisms mentioned above couldn't solve this problem well until Erard. He invented a device called the double escapement. It allowed us to quickly repeat playing the same note. The principle is that, based on the English grand piano mechanism, an additional lever was added in the middle. The purpose of this lever is to prevent the hammer from falling all the way down after striking the strings. Instead, it falls halfway. So this is the greatest invention, and this device is still used in all our grand pianos today. Starting from the 19th century, people's pursuit of sound quality became increasingly demanding. And also because orchestras became larger, everyone hoped that the piano's sound could be more resonant. This required the strings to withstand greater pressure, which meant that the piano frame needed to be very sturdy, as mentioned before. They all used metal frames for the piano sound subsequently. In the subsequent period, historical pianos appeared. Historical pianos refer to those where the strings are arranged in a cross pattern, which saves space. Until around 1850, the piano had basically reached a very stable state, and since then, we've made very few improvements. Previously unmentioned, like the triangular shape, the middle pedal, was also invented in the 1860s. Later, Steinway pianos made some improvements, changing the pivot under the keys from a square to a round shape. This made the initial touch more sensitive, and it is said that the response speed of their pianos is faster than others. For a grand piano, each action has over 100 parts, making it very complex, and each string can withstand a weight of about 170 pounds. That's all for today's content. I hope it was helpful to everyone.